Those words hurt. But they changed our lives forever.
Hey there, grab yourself a coffee and enjoy the story. Soft morning light filtered through the sheer curtains of Ashley Williams's bedroom as she watched her husband, Mark, still asleep beside her. After 5 years together, she still found herself admiring the way the golden rays of sunlight outlined his strong features. Ashley smiled, feeling that familiar wave of gratitude. Their marriage wasn't perfect, none were, but she felt blessed to have found a man who, despite his flaws, showed commitment. She slid quietly out of bed, careful not to wake him. Mark had come home late the night before after yet another business dinner that went longer than expected. Ashley was used to these frequent absences. It was the price to pay for the growing success of his architecture firm. In their spacious, functional kitchen, she brewed coffee while mentally organizing her day. At 32, Ashley split her time between working as a nurse at the city hospital and chasing her dream of opening a small community clinic. There was something deeply fulfilling about helping people in their most vulnerable moments, maybe because she knew all too well what it meant to be vulnerable. Born with a condition that affected her left leg, Ashley walked with a slight limp. During her teenage years, it had been a source of endless anxiety and bullying. Now, as an adult, she rarely thought about it, except during those moments of insecurity that crept up uninvited, like shadows of a past that never fully disappeared. "Morning!" Mark's voice came from behind her, startling her. He walked over and kissed the top of her head, a tender gesture that always made Ashley feel protected. "Making your famous waffles? I thought you'd sleep in," she replied, handing him a cup of coffee. "Did dinner run late last night?" Mark nodded vaguely, focusing on the coffee. "Tough clients. You know how it is." Ashley noticed something different in his tone, a subtle tension that had become more frequent in recent weeks. There was a time when Mark shared every detail of his meetings, venting about the frustrations and celebrating the wins. Now, his answers were increasingly short and evasive. "Laura called yesterday," Ashley said, switching the subject. Laura had been her best friend since college. "She and Thomas are planning an anniversary party next month and want us to go." Mark took another sip of coffee before responding. "We'll see how my schedule looks. It's 6 weeks away, Mark. I think you can plan your schedule in advance for something important." Ashley tried to mask the frustration in her voice but failed. "Why is every one of your friends' events always important, Ashley?" Mark set his mug on the counter a bit too forcefully. "Not everyone thinks these social gatherings are as essential as you do." The comment stung more than Ashley wanted to admit. She tried to remember the last time they went out to see friends. 2 months? 3? Lately, Mark seemed to find excuses to avoid any social outing not tied to work. "Okay," she gave in, as she had been doing more and more often. "I just thought it might be nice for us to get out a little, have some fun. Lately, it feels like—" She hesitated, unsure if she should continue. "Feels like what?" His voice hardened, daring her to finish the thought. "Nothing." Ashley shook her head, knowing it wasn't the right moment for an argument. "Forget it. I'm gonna get ready for work." In the bathroom, as she brushed her teeth, Ashley stared at her reflection in the mirror. Time had been kind to her. Her big brown eyes still sparkled, and only a few fine lines had begun to show around them when she smiled. Her brown hair fell in soft waves to her shoulders, framing a face her mother always described as sweetly determined. But there was something different in her gaze, a question left unspoken, a growing restlessness she tried to ignore. Was this just a phase? All marriages had ups and downs, didn't they? As she applied light makeup, Mark's phone rang in the other room. Ashley heard his voice drop to a near whisper. Instinctively, she strained to listen, catching fragments she probably shouldn't have. "Can't talk now." "Yeah. Soon." "No. She doesn't know." Ashley's heart raced. She turned off the faucet to hear better, but by the time she got back to the bedroom, Mark had already ended the call. He looked at her with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Who was that?" Ashley asked, trying to sound casual. Work. There are some issues with the shopping center project, Mark answered quickly. Maybe too quickly. I have to leave early today. Ashley nodded, pretending to believe him. She watched as he dressed in a rush, choosing the blue shirt she had given him for his last birthday. A detail that once would have made her smile now left a bitter taste. Who was he dressing up so carefully for? Later at the hospital, Ashley tried to focus on her patients, but her mind kept circling back to those snippets of conversation. Melissa, a co-worker, noticed her distraction during lunch. Tough day? She asked, sitting beside Ashley in the hospital cafeteria. Just tired, Ashley lied, pushing her salad around without really eating. Melissa gave her a knowing look. Either that, or something's up at home. I know that look, honey. Ashley considered denying it, but something inside her ached to talk. I think Mark's changed. He's distant. Maybe it's just work, but your gut says otherwise. Melissa finished for her. Look, I'm not trying to be dramatic, but my first husband started out exactly like that. Secret calls, late nights, shifts in behavior. That doesn't necessarily mean he's... Ashley couldn't bring herself to finish the sentence. Of course not, Melissa said, touching her hand gently. But it also doesn't mean we should ignore our intuition. Have you tried talking to him directly? Ashley shook her head. I'm afraid of what he might say. Sometimes the fear of the unknown is worse than the truth, no matter how painful, Melissa said, standing to head back to work. Think about it. The rest of the day, Melissa's words echoed in Ashley's mind. When she got home, it was already dark, and there was no sign of Mark. On the fridge, she found a hastily scribbled note. Emergency meeting. Don't wait for dinner. Ashley crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash harder than necessary. 5 years ago, a note like that would have come with a sweet message or a little heart at the end. Now, it was just cold words on a scrap of paper. Determined not to spend another evening alone waiting, Ashley called Laura and accepted an invitation she had previously turned down. A dinner with old college friends. As she got ready, she sent Mark a message, letting him know where she'd be. She didn't even care when the read receipt appeared with no reply. That night, for the first time in a long while, Ashley allowed herself to laugh and enjoy the company without constantly thinking about her husband. Still, when she returned home to a dark, empty apartment, a strange feeling washed over her. Not just sadness or worry, but a growing certainty that something fundamental had shifted. What she didn't know yet was just how deep that shift would be, or how painful the truth she was about to uncover. The next morning, Ashley woke up alone again. Mark's side of the bed was untouched. He hadn't come home at all. She stared at the ceiling for a few moments, that familiar knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. For someone used to taking care of others, it felt strange to feel so powerless in her own marriage. She picked up her phone and checked her messages. Nothing from Mark. She resisted the urge to call him, part of her afraid of what she might find out. Instead, she got up and went about her morning routine, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy on a day that felt anything but normal. As she made coffee, memories of how it all began played in her mind like an old movie. Ashley had been 27 when she met Mark at a hospital charity event. She was helping with the organization, and he was one of the invited patrons, representing his then small architecture firm. Mark had noticed her right away, a young nurse who, despite a slight limp, moved through the room with grace and determination, solving problems and making everyone around her feel welcome. By the end of the night, Mark approached her. Ashley remembered his exact first words. "I've been watching you. I've never seen someone turn work into art the way you do." The compliment caught her off guard. She wasn't used to being noticed like that. Their first date came a week later. Ashley had been nervous, unsure if a man like Mark, successful, charming, seemingly flawless, could really be interested in her. Her whole life had been shaped by her disability, from childhood treatments to high school bullying. Even as a successful, established nurse, Those old insecurities had never fully gone away. "You think about it too much," her mother, Catherine, used to say. "Most people don't even notice your walk, and if they do and care, they're not worth your time." Catherine had always been her rock, especially after Ashley's father abandoned the family when she was just 8. He couldn't handle having a daughter who wasn't perfect. Ashley had once overheard her mom say to a friend, thinking Ashley was out of earshot. Those words had sunk deep into her subconscious, planting a seed of doubt that would sprout over and over again throughout her life. Was she, somehow, not enough? As her relationship with Mark deepened, that seed sometimes sprouted at the most unexpected moments, like when he introduced her to his polished upscale friends, and she noticed the curious looks aimed at her limp, or when she met his mother, Eleanor, a high society woman who barely concealed her disappointment upon meeting her son's choice. "A nurse? How interesting," Eleanor had commented at their first meeting, her tone making it clear she expected far more for her only son. Despite all that, Mark always seemed genuinely in love. He defended her when necessary and made her feel special, like no one ever had. When he proposed after a year of dating, Ashley could hardly believe it. "Why me?" she asked through joyful tears, the ring sparkling on her finger. "Because you're real," Mark said, kissing her gently. "In a world full of fakes, you're absolutely genuine. That's what I love most about you." The ringing phone pulled her from her memories. She quickly answered when she saw Mark's name on the screen. "Where are you?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "At the office," Mark replied, sounding tired. "We worked all night on the shopping center project, slept on the conference room couch." "We?" Ashley couldn't hide the tension in her voice. "Me and the team, Ashley," he said impatiently. "Look, I just called to let you know I'm heading straight into a meeting with the investors. Don't wait for me for lunch." "Mark, we need to talk." There was a pause on the other end. "About what? About us? About what's going on?" Another pause, longer this time. "Nothing's going on, Ashley. I'm just busy." "Are you being honest with me?" The words slipped out before she could stop them. "What are you implying?" His voice sharpened. "Nothing. Ashley took a deep breath. "I miss you. It feels like you're getting more and more distant." "I'm working hard for us, Ashley. For our future." His tone softened slightly. "Look, I have to go. We'll talk later, okay?" The call ended before she could say anything else. Ashley stared at her phone, that uncomfortable feeling growing in her chest. Since when did working for our future mean pulling so far away? At the hospital, Ashley tried to stay focused on her patients, but her mind kept drifting back to Mark. During her break, she decided to call Catherine. Her mother always had a level-headed perspective, even in the toughest moments. "Sweetheart, you need to trust your instincts," Catherine said, after listening to Ashley's concerns. "If something feels wrong, it probably is. What if it's just paranoia? What if he really is just working hard? Then you'll have an honest conversation and clear things up," Catherine replied calmly. "But remember one thing. You deserve respect and honesty, Ashley. Don't settle for less." Her mother's words echoed through her mind for the rest of the day. When her shift ended, she made an impulsive decision. She would go to Mark's office. If he was really there, working like he said, there was no harm in a surprise visit, right? Mark's firm was housed in an imposing building of glass and steel, gleaming under the late afternoon sun. Ashley felt strangely intimidated as she stepped into the lobby. She checked in at the front desk and was told that Mark was in a meeting. "I'll wait," she said, settling into one of the sleek lobby couches. Half an hour later, the elevator doors opened, and Ashley saw Mark walking out with a woman she recognized as Veronica Patterson, one of the firm's most talented architects. The two were deep in conversation, so engrossed in each other that they didn't immediately notice Ashley. There was something about the way they stood close, the way Mark smiled, that same smile Ashley hadn't seen directed at her in months, that made her chest tighten. It wasn't just professional rapport. There was an intimacy there that was impossible to ignore. When Mark finally saw Ashley, he froze for a moment, his expression quickly shifting from surprise to discomfort. "Ashley, what are you doing here?" "I thought I'd surprise you," she replied, keeping her voice steady despite the storm inside. "Maybe we could have dinner together. It's been a while." We're in the middle of a big project," he stammered, glancing quickly at Veronica. "We were actually just about to get back to work." Veronica, looking equally uncomfortable, extended a hand. "It's nice to finally meet you. Mark talks about you a lot." "Funny," Ashley said, gripping her hand tighter than necessary. "He's never mentioned you." An awkward silence settled over the three of them until Mark cleared his throat. "Veronica, can you give us a minute?" Once alone, Mark crossed his arms defensively. "You could have called first." "Why? Is there some reason I can't visit my husband at work?" Ashley locked eyes with him, daring him to lie. "That's not it. It's just, I'm busy, like I told you." He ran a hand through his hair, an anxious tic Ashley knew all too well. "This isn't a good time." "And when is a good time, Mark? Because lately, it seems like there's never a good time for us." An employee passed by, glancing curiously at the couple. Mark gently took Ashley's arm and led her to a more private corner. "Let's not do this here," he whispered, clearly irritated. "Do what? Talk? Because that's what couples do, Mark. They talk." Ashley's voice wavered slightly. "Or, at least, they used to." Mark checked his watch, his impatience clear. "I have a video call in 10 minutes. Can we talk about this at home?" "If you actually go home," Ashley replied, which is becoming increasingly rare. Something shifted in Mark's expression. A flicker of guilt, maybe even fear. Whatever it was, it vanished quickly behind his practiced professional mask. "I need to get back," he said at last. "I promise I'll be home for dinner, and we'll talk." Ashley nodded, knowing that was all she'd get from him for now. As she walked out of the building, a dull ache throbbed in her chest. The image of Mark and Veronica together kept replaying in her mind, uninvited and relentless. In the taxi home, Ashley got a message from Laura inviting her to a last-minute dinner with some mutual friends. Her first instinct was to decline. Mark had promised he'd come home, but something made her hesitate. How many promises had he already broken in the past few months? "We're counting on you at 8, Laura insisted, when Ashley mentioned Mark might come home. "Bring him if he shows, but don't waste your night waiting on someone who might not." Her friend's words hit a nerve. Ashley decided she would go. She sent Mark a message letting him know where she'd be, just in case he actually came home like he said he would. As she got ready, Ashley came across an old wedding photo on the dresser. They looked so happy, so full of hope. What had changed? When had they become strangers? In that moment, staring at the photo, Ashley had no idea that in just a few hours, her life would change forever. That the most painful words she would ever hear would come from the man who had once vowed to love her always. And that the marriage she believed to be imperfect but solid would reveal a truth far more bitter than any suspicion she'd dared to entertain. The restaurant Laura had chosen was packed that Friday night. Soft lighting bathed the sophisticated space, where the murmur of conversations created a warm, inviting atmosphere. Ashley almost turned around when she arrived alone. There was something oddly intimidating about stepping into a social space without Mark by her side, as if over the past few years she had forgotten how to be just herself, not part of a couple. "Ashley! Over here!" Laura waved from a corner table, surrounded by familiar faces. Ashley walked between the tables, hyper-aware of her slight limp, something that rarely bothered her anymore, except in moments when she felt vulnerable. Like right now. "I thought you weren't coming." Laura greeted her with a warm hug. "Where's Mark?" "Working," Ashley replied with a forced smile, accepting the glass of wine someone handed her. As always, dinner carried on with lively conversations and laughter. It felt good to be among friends, people who had known her long before she became Mark Williams's wife. Ashley realized how long it had been since she'd had a night like this. Without worry, without constantly checking her phone, without that gnawing feeling that something was wrong. So, Thomas, Laura's husband, began after his second glass of wine. "How are the plans going for your community clinic? Laura mentioned it was your big dream." Ashley blinked, surprised. It had been so long since she'd talked about it. She'd almost forgotten what it felt like to have dreams of her own. "It's on hold, actually," she admitted. "With work at the hospital and everything else, it never feels like the right time. The right time never comes if you just wait for it." Daniel, an old college friend, chimed in. "You have to make it." Something about his words struck a deep chord in Ashley. How long had she been putting her own dreams on the back burner? How much of herself had she set aside while waiting for that right moment Mark always said would come eventually? "You know what?" Ashley sat up straighter, feeling a spark of determination she hadn't felt in a long time. "You're absolutely right. I'm going to restart that project." Laura raised her glass in a toast. To Ashley and her community clinic. Everyone cheered, and for the first time in months, Ashley felt that flicker of excitement, the sense of possibility that had once defined her life, before all the doubts and insecurities took over. The rest of the night passed in a happy blur. When she finally checked her phone, it was after midnight, and there were 3 messages from Mark. "Where are you? I came home and you're not here. I called the hospital and they said you left hours ago." There was no apology for missing dinner, no acknowledgement of his broken promise, just veiled accusations, as if she were the one who had let him down. Ashley said her goodbyes and got a cab home, the warm glow from earlier slowly replaced by anxiety. What was she going to say to Mark? Why did she feel guilty when he was the one who didn't show up? The apartment was dimly lit when she arrived. Mark was sitting in the living room with a glass of whiskey in hand, his expression unreadable. "Finally," he said as she entered, not even getting up. "I was starting to think you weren't coming home. How did it feel?" Ashley set her purse down on the table, staring directly at him. "Because that's how I feel almost every night, Mark." He took a sip of his whiskey, avoiding her gaze. "This is different." "Oh, really? How is it different?" Ashley's frustration was clear in her voice. "I'm working, Ashley. Building something." "What were you doing? Drinking with friends?" The unfairness of his words hit her like a slap. "You promised you'd be home for dinner, to talk. There was a project emergency." "There always is." Ashley crossed her arms. "Funny how these emergencies always pop up when we need to talk about our marriage." Mark stood up abruptly, setting his glass down hard enough to spill some of the dark liquid. "What do you want from me, Ashley? I'm doing the best I can." "No, you're not," she shot back, years of pent-up frustration finally breaking through. "You're doing everything you can to avoid our marriage, to avoid me." "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" Ashley felt tears burning behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. "When was the last time we had dinner together? Watched a movie? Or just talked without you checking your phone every 5 seconds? Mark ran a hand through his hair, that old gesture of exasperation she knew too well. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under." "Then help me understand." Ashley took a step toward him. "We're supposed to be a team, Mark. At least we used to be." For a moment, something crumbled in his expression, a crack in the carefully maintained mask. "I don't," he began, then stopped. "You don't what?" "Nothing." He shook his head. "I'm tired. Let's just sleep and talk tomorrow." "Always tomorrow," Ashley muttered, but didn't push further. She was too exhausted for another round of going in circles. The next morning, to her surprise, Mark was still home when she woke up. In the kitchen, he was making coffee, something he hadn't done in so long that the gesture felt almost surreal. "Good morning," he offered a hesitant smile. "I thought we could have breakfast together." Ashley nodded, cautiously hopeful. "That'd be nice." They sat at the kitchen table, a domestic scene that somehow felt extraordinary after so long. "I've been thinking," Mark began, choosing his words carefully. "You were right last night. I've been distant." "Yes, you have," Ashley agreed, watching him closely. The shopping center project is important, but he hesitated. Maybe I've let it take too much of my time. Of our time. It's more than just time, Mark, Ashley said softly. You're not just physically absent. Even when you're here, you feel miles away. Mark nodded slowly. I know, and I want to change that. He reached across the table, taking her hand. What do you think about taking some time just for us? Maybe a weekend away? Ashley felt a flicker of hope. Are you serious? Absolutely. His smile seemed genuine. We could go to that mountain lodge you've always wanted to visit. Next weekend? Why not? I'll make the arrangements today. It all sounded too good to be true, but Ashley wanted to believe. Needed to believe there was still something worth saving in their marriage. There's one more thing, Mark added, his expression softening. You mentioned that community clinic project. Why not pick it back up? I can even help with the architectural design if you want. Ashley could hardly believe what she was hearing. It was as if the old Mark had returned, the thoughtful, supportive man she'd married. I was actually thinking about it last night, she admitted with a smile. That would be amazing. Mark squeezed her hand, his eyes locking with hers. I want us to be a team again, Ashley, like we used to be. When he left for work an hour later, Ashley felt lighter than she had in months. Maybe they'd just gone through a rough patch. Maybe all her doubts and fears had been unfounded. At the hospital, Melissa noticed the change in her right away. You look different today, she said during lunch. What happened? Ashley told her about the conversation with Mark, the trip, his support for her clinic project. Melissa listened intently, her expression a mix of happiness and concern. That's wonderful, really. But? Ashley caught the slight hesitation in her voice. No, but, Melissa smiled, squeezing her hand. I'm just happy for you. Over the next few days, Ashley let herself believe her marriage was truly healing. Mark came home earlier, asked about her day, seemed genuinely interested in her plans. On Wednesday, he even brought a rough draft of how the clinic space could be laid out. This is amazing, Ashley said, studying the detailed drawing. You really thought this through. I want this to work, he said, kissing her forehead. It's important to you, so it's important to me. By Thursday, Ashley was already planning what to pack for their mountain getaway. The lodge was in a remote area, known for its stunning views and romantic setting. It was exactly what they needed. Just the two of them, away from distractions. As she folded clothes, her phone rang. It was Lauren, a co-worker who never called unless it was serious. Ashley? I'm sorry to call like this, but... Lauren hesitated. I saw something, and I don't know if I should say anything, but you're my friend, and... Lauren, what is it? Ashley felt a chill. I just had lunch with my brother. We were at that new restaurant near the financial district, and... She paused painfully. I saw Mark, with a woman. Ashley's heart started to race. He works near there. It was probably a business lunch. Ashley? Lauren's voice was gentle, but firm. It wasn't a business lunch. It was personal. They were holding hands across the table, and when they left, he kissed her. It wasn't just a friendly kiss. The world seemed to slow down, every word landing like a blow. Are you sure it was him? 100%. I'm so sorry, Ashley. Really? When the call ended, Ashley stood frozen, trying to process what she'd just heard. Part of her wanted to deny it, find a rational explanation. But another part, the one that had been sensing the shift, feeling the growing distance, knew she was finally facing the truth she'd tried so hard to avoid. Her hands trembled as she grabbed her car keys. She couldn't just sit there wondering. She had to see for herself. The restaurant Lauren mentioned wasn't far. Ashley parked across the street, her eyes scanning the entrance, still hoping it was all a terrible mistake. Then she saw them. Mark and Veronica. Not just some colleague, the woman from the office. They weren't holding hands now, but the closeness between them was obvious even from a distance. The way he leaned in to say something in her ear, how she laughed in response, it was all too familiar. The same gestures he once reserved for Ashley. When they stopped near Mark's car, and he gently touched Veronica's face with unmistakable tenderness, any remaining hope Ashley had evaporated. She cried the whole way home. Not quiet tears, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place she didn't even know existed. Years of love, trust, and shared dreams shattered. At home, she stared at the half-packed bags for their weekend trip, now a cruel reminder of the false hope she'd clung to. With one motion, she swept everything to the floor. When Mark arrived that night, Ashley was sitting in the darkened living room, a small lamp casting a soft glow over her face. "Ash, why are you sitting in the dark?" he asked, flicking on the lights, then froze when he saw her expression. "What happened? How was lunch today?" The question sounded harmless, but it made Mark tense immediately. It was normal, just a client meeting. The ease with which the lie left his mouth broke something inside her. "It's amazing," she said, her voice eerily calm, "how easily you lie. You don't even hesitate." "What are you talking about?" "I saw you, Mark." Ashley stood, facing him directly. "At the restaurant, with Veronica." His face went pale, then quickly recovered. "It was a business lunch, Ashley. Don't be paranoid." "No." She shook her head, a strange clarity settling over her. "No more lies. No more making me question what I see and feel. I saw the way you touched her. I saw the way you looked at her." Mark hesitated, clearly weighing whether to keep lying. Finally, his shoulders slumped. "You weren't supposed to find out like this." "Oh, really? And how was I supposed to find out my husband is cheating on me?" He didn't answer right away, rubbing his face in a gesture of defeat. "It's complicated, Ashley." "Then explain it. I want to understand how everything we built together came to mean so little to you." His expression hardened. Something changed in his eyes. "Care mesmo saber, Ashley?" Mark's voice sounded oddly distant, almost cold. "Do you really want the truth?" Something in the way he said it made Ashley hesitate, as if she were standing at the edge of a cliff, but she'd come too far to turn back now. "Yes, I want the truth, all of it." Mark walked over to the bar, poured himself a generous shot of whiskey, downed it in one go, and then looked back at her. "I never loved you the way you deserved," he said at last, the words slicing through the air between them. "I tried, Ashley. I swear I did." Ashley felt like the ground had vanished beneath her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that—" Mark took a deep breath, like he was summoning the last of his courage. "I married you out of pity, Ashley, because you were different, special. I thought being with someone like you would make me a better man." Each word stabbed at her chest like a sharpened blade. Ashley stood speechless, unable to process what she was hearing. "Out of pity?" she finally managed to say, her voice nearly unrecognizable. "You were always extraordinary," Mark went on, like he needed to justify himself. "Your strength, your determination despite your condition. I admired that. I thought that admiration would grow into love over time." Ashley closed her eyes, trying to contain the tsunami of pain threatening to overtake her. "5 years, Mark. We've been married for 5 years. And for 5 years I tried to be the husband you deserved," he replied, his voice tinged with frustration. "I tried to make it work. While sleeping with another woman?" Ashley couldn't hold back the bitter sarcasm. "Veronica isn't just some fling. What we have is real." The sincerity in his voice was maybe the cruelest part. "It's different than anything I've ever felt." Ashley felt a wave of nausea. She had to grip the table to keep from falling. So all this time, every moment, every word of love, it was all a lie? "Not all of it," Mark said quickly. "I really did care about you, Ashley. I always have." "Caring isn't loving," she snapped, tears finally spilling down her cheeks despite her resolve. "And pity is definitely not love." Mark took a step toward her, like he was going to touch her, but Ashley backed away. "Don't you dare," she warned, her voice trembling. "Don't you dare touch me right now." "Ashley, I know you're angry." "Angry?" She cut him off with a humorless, sharp laugh. "Angry doesn't even begin to describe what I feel, Mark." You destroyed everything. Not just our marriage, but my trust, my self-worth, years of my life. I never wanted to hurt you, he insisted, but the words rang hollow. But you did, Ashley said simply. And the worst part is, I knew. On some level, I knew something was wrong. But I loved you so much. I convinced myself I was just imagining it. A heavy silence fell between them, thick with things left unsaid and shattered dreams. Ashley wiped her tears with the back of her hand, trying to pull herself together. I want you to leave, she said finally. Now. This is my apartment too, Mark protested. And it was bought with my inheritance, Ashley countered, a surprising strength rising through the pain. Leave, Mark. I can't even look at you right now. He looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Ashley's devastated expression stopped him. He nodded slowly, grabbed his keys and wallet. I'll come back tomorrow, he said from the doorway. When you've calmed down. I won't be here, Ashley replied, locking eyes with him. It's over, Mark. For real. When the door closed behind him, Ashley collapsed onto the couch, her whole body racked with sobs that seemed torn from the depths of her soul. His words echoed cruelly in her mind. I married you out of pity. All her insecurities, all the doubts she'd carried since childhood, came crashing down at once. Her father's abandonment, the pitying looks she'd always tried to ignore, the nagging feeling of never being enough. Mark had sliced straight into that ancient wound with surgical precision. Ashley didn't know how long she stayed like that, lost in the pain, but when she finally moved, the first light of morning was already filtering through the curtains. On autopilot, she got up, washed her face, and began making calls. First to the hospital, letting them know she'd need a few days off. Then to Laura, who picked up groggily but instantly became alert at the sound of Ashley's broken voice. I'm coming over now, Laura insisted before Ashley could even finish explaining. No, Ashley replied. I need some time alone. Could you help me find a temporary place? I can't stay here. Use my beach apartment, Laura offered without hesitation. It's empty. No one will find you there. 3 hours later, Ashley was driving out of the city, 2 suitcases in the trunk with only the essentials. She left a short note for Mark, letting him know she'd be in touch when she was ready to discuss the practicalities of divorce. There was nothing else to say. Laura's apartment was in a small coastal town 2 hours away. It was simple but cozy, with a view of the ocean. Ashley dropped her bags in the bedroom and walked out onto the balcony, breathing in the salty air as she watched the waves crash on the shore. It seemed impossible that just 24 hours ago she had been packing for a romantic getaway, thinking her marriage was being saved. The speed with which everything collapsed made her dizzy. In the days that followed, Ashley moved like a ghost. She barely slept, ate even less. Her phone stayed off most of the time. She couldn't face the dozens of messages and missed calls from Mark. What was left to say? It was during one of those sleepless nights, staring out the window at the stars, that the first wave of nausea hit her. She barely made it to the bathroom in time. She chalked it up to stress, poor eating, sleeplessness. But when the same thing happened the next morning, and the one after that, a disturbing thought began to form. After a week at Laura's place, Ashley finally mustered the courage to visit the local pharmacy. Her hands trembled as she paid for the pregnancy test, avoiding the curious look from the clerk. Back at the apartment, she followed the instructions mechanically, then sat on the edge of the tub, staring at the little device that could change everything all over again. When the 2 pink lines appeared, clear and undeniable, Ashley felt an overwhelming surge of conflicting emotions. Terror, confusion, and, unexpectedly, a tiny, flickering spark of joy. A baby, she whispered to the empty apartment, her hands instinctively resting on her still flat belly. The cruel irony didn't escape her. Just when she thought her situation couldn't be more complicated, she found out she was carrying a child by the man who had admitted to marrying her out of pity. That night, for the first time since discovering Mark's betrayal, Ashley cried not just for herself, but for the innocent life growing inside her. What kind of beginning was this? What kind of family would this child have? 2 weeks later, Ashley finally turned her phone on to make some necessary calls. Dozens of messages and missed calls from Mark flooded the screen, each one more desperate than the last. "Ashley, please call me. We need to talk. That's not what I meant. I'm sorry. More than I can say." The last was an email, sent the night before. "Ashley, I don't know if you'll read this, but I have to try." What I said was unforgivable. I was angry, cornered, and I said things that weren't true. I didn't marry you out of pity. That was a cruel lie said in the heat of the moment. The truth is more complicated. I married you because you inspired me. You made me want to be better. But over time, I realized I wasn't the man you deserved, and instead of facing my own inadequacies, I looked for validation somewhere else. It was cowardice, plain and simple. What happened with Veronica was wrong. I ended it, not because you found out, but because I finally saw how deeply I hurt the most important person in my life. Please give me a chance to fix this. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I just ask for the chance to prove I can change, that we can rebuild something new from the ashes I created. I'll be waiting for you, for as long as it takes. Mark Ashley read the email 3 times, every word triggering a fresh wave of pain. It was just like Mark, eloquent, persuasive, seemingly sincere. At another time, it might have been enough to crack her resolve. But now, with a new life growing inside her, Ashley knew she had to be stronger than ever. She couldn't make decisions based on emotion alone. There was far more at stake. With trembling hands, she finally made the call she'd been putting off. "Dr. Peterson, this is Ashley Williams. I need to schedule an appointment as soon as possible." 2 days later, Ashley sat in Dr. James Peterson's office, an obstetrician recommended by Laura. As she waited, she looked around at the other women, some with visible bumps, some accompanied by attentive partners. The sight made her heart ache. "Ms. Williams?" the nurse called, guiding her to an exam room. The ultrasound confirmed what the home test already had. Approximately 6 weeks along, developing normally as far as could be seen at this stage. "Everything looks good, Dr. E." Peterson said with a reassuring smile, handing her a small ultrasound printout. "Do you have any questions?" Ashley had hundreds of questions, but none a doctor could answer. How do you raise a child alone? How do you tell the father? Did he even deserve to know? What if she chose not to tell him? "Actually," she began, hesitant, "I'm going through a divorce. The father, he doesn't know yet." Dr. Peterson nodded with understanding. "Complicated family situations are more common than you'd think, Ms. Williams. What's most important now is that you get the support you need for a healthy pregnancy, physically and emotionally." When she left the office, Ashley held the tiny ultrasound image like something fragile and sacred. In black and white, barely anything looked like a baby yet, but it was real, proof that in the midst of so much destruction, something new was beginning. 3 days later, Ashley finally found the courage to call her mother. Catherine answered on the second ring, her voice immediately full of worry. "Ashley, thank God, I've been so worried. I'm sorry I didn't call sooner," Ashley said, guilt tightening in her chest. "It's been a rough few weeks." "Laura told me the basics," Catherine said gently. "That bastard. I always knew there was something off about him." "Mom," Ashley sighed. "Sorry, sweetheart. I know that doesn't help right now. How are you?" Ashley hesitated. "I'm pregnant." The silence lasted only a second before Catherine answered, her voice strong and full of love. "I'm coming to you. Don't even argue. My daughter is not going through this alone." When she hung up, Ashley felt a rush of relief. Maybe she wouldn't have to face everything by herself after all. The next afternoon, as she tidied the apartment for her mother's arrival, the doorbell rang. Ashley froze. No one besides Laura, and now her mother, knew where she was. She approached the door cautiously. "Who is it?" "It's me, Ashley. Please open the door." Mark's voice made her heart race. How had he found her? "Go away, Mark," she said through the closed door. "I have nothing to say to you." "Laura told me where you were," he admitted. "She didn't want to, but I pushed." "Please, Ashley, 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Ashley closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. Maybe it was better to face this now, to get it over with. With shaking hands, she unlocked the door. Mark looked terrible. Deep circles under his eyes, unshaven, rumpled clothes. Nothing like the polished, confident executive she once knew. "Thank you," he said quietly, as she stepped aside and let him in. In the small living room, they stood facing each other like strangers trying to recognize what remained. Ashley crossed her arms, creating a physical barrier between them. 5 minutes, she reminded him. Mark nodded, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "First, I want you to know I ended things with Veronica. Completely." "It doesn't matter to me," Ashley replied coldly. "Our marriage ended the moment you said you married me out of pity." "It wasn't true," Mark insisted, taking a step toward her. "I was angry. I felt cornered. I said the cruelest thing I could think of, because I wanted to hurt you. It was unforgivable." "Well, it worked," Ashley said, keeping her distance. "And you know what the worst part is? Deep down, I always feared it might be true. I always wondered why someone like you would choose someone like me." "Ashley, don't—" "Let me finish," she cut him off. "I've spent my whole life fighting the feeling of being less than, of having to prove my worth. And then you came along, made me feel special, chosen. I believed I'd finally found someone who saw me beyond my disability. But in the end, it was exactly because of that you stayed." Mark looked devastated. "That's not how it was." "It doesn't matter how it was," Ashley replied, her voice laced with a deep weariness. "It's over, Mark. There's no going back. I'm asking for another chance," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking anyway. We can start over, go to therapy, anything." Ashley shook her head slowly. "You can't rebuild something that was based on a lie. And even if we could, I don't know if I could ever look at you again without hearing those words." Mark lowered his head, defeated. That's when he noticed the small envelope on the coffee table, the logo from a medical clinic clearly visible. His eyes met Ashley's, a silent question hanging in the air. "Are you sick?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. For a moment, Ashley considered lying, saying it was just a routine checkup. It would have been easier. But something inside her knew that, no matter what happened between them, he had a right to know. "I'm pregnant, Mark." The impact of her words was immediate. Mark staggered as if struck, grabbing the wall for support. "Pregnant?" he repeated, stunned. "But how? When—" "6 weeks," Ashley said calmly. "It probably happened before all of this." "Oh my God, Ashley." He ran his hands over his face, clearly shaken. "This changes everything." "No, it doesn't," she corrected firmly. "I'm not going to use a baby to glue back a broken marriage." "But it's our child," Mark protested. "Yes, it is," Ashley nodded. "And I will do whatever it takes to protect them, including protecting them from growing up in a home without real love or respect." Mark looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Ashley's resolve stopped him. He stared at her for a long moment, like he was truly seeing her for the first time. "What do you want me to do?" he finally asked. "For now, I want you to leave," Ashley replied honestly. "I need time to process all of this, to decide where we go from here. We're going to have a child together, Mark, which means you'll always be part of my life in some way. But what that looks like, I don't know yet." Mark nodded slowly, accepting the truth. As he reached the door, he turned one last time. "I really did love you, Ashley. Maybe not the way you deserved, but I did. And I'm going to love this baby, no matter what happens between us." Ashley didn't reply. When the door closed behind him, she placed her hands over her still flat belly, feeling a strength rise inside her, steady, unshakable. like nothing she'd ever felt before. "It's just us now," she whispered to the baby barely beginning to exist, "and we're going to be okay. I promise." That night, as she watched the ocean waves roll in through the window, Ashley realized she'd hit rock bottom. Betrayed, humiliated, with a baby on the way and a shattered marriage behind her. And yet, for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel hopeless. She'd reached the bottom, yes, but now there was only one way left to go: up. The small seaside apartment had become a refuge in the months that followed. With Catherine's arrival, Ashley finally found space to breathe, to begin processing everything that had happened. Her mother, pragmatic as always, brought order to the chaos with surprising efficiency. "First, you need a good lawyer," Catherine declared on the second day, while preparing ginger tea to help with Ashley's morning nausea. "Don't trust anything Mark says about amicable agreements." Ashley watched her mother move through the tiny kitchen, admiring her strength. Catherine had raised a daughter on her own, facing not only a husband who walked out, but also the challenges of raising a child with special needs, in a time with far fewer resources. If she had done it, Ashley could too. "I've already contacted Sarah Miller," Ashley replied. "Laura recommended her. We have a meeting next week." Catherine nodded approvingly. "Good. And what about work? You can't hide out forever, sweetheart." Ashley sighed, her hand resting absently on the small bump just beginning to show. At 3 months pregnant, the more intense symptoms had eased, leaving her with greater mental clarity. "I asked for a transfer to the regional hospital here," she said. "There's an opening in pediatrics. It's not exactly what I used to do, but it's a start." "And your dream of the community clinic?" Ashley gave a sad smile. "I think some dreams have to wait." "Nonsense," Catherine replied flatly, setting a steaming cup in front of her. "Dreams don't wait. They just change shape sometimes." The meeting with Sarah Miller, a well-known divorce attorney known for her firm but fair approach, was eye-opening. In her sleek office overlooking the city center, Sarah laid out Ashley's options with ruthless clarity. "Mark has considerable assets," she explained, reviewing the documents Ashley brought. "But the apartment was primarily purchased with your inheritance, which gives us a strong negotiating position." "I don't want anything from him," Ashley insisted. "Just a fair and clean division." Sarah looked over her glasses. "What about child support?" "You're entitled to that, Ashley. This isn't just about you anymore." Ashley nodded reluctantly. The lawyer was right. Every decision now affected more than just her. "Mark wants to be involved in the baby's life," Ashley admitted. "He calls almost every day to ask how we're doing. And how do you feel about that?" Ashley hesitated, conflicted. "Part of me wants to keep him as far away as possible, but another part knows my child deserves a present father, if he really wants to be one." Sarah made a few notes before responding. "We'll draw up a temporary custody agreement, something that works during the pregnancy and the first months after birth. We can revisit it, depending on how things evolve." As Ashley left the office, she felt strangely lighter. There was something freeing about turning emotional confusion into practical steps. In the weeks that followed, as she settled into her new job at the regional hospital, Ashley began planting roots in the small coastal town. The community was welcoming, less frantic than the big city she had shared with Mark. Slowly, she found a rhythm, a new normal. Mark kept his word, calling regularly, but respecting the physical distance she had set. He always asked about the medical appointments, offered financial support for anything she needed. During a video call, when Ashley showed him the latest ultrasound, she saw tears in his eyes. "It's a boy," she said, watching his reaction carefully. "A son," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "Our son." Something in the way he said it, a mix of awe and sorrow, touched Ashley unexpectedly. For a fleeting moment, she let herself imagine what could have been. The three of them, a family, celebrating each milestone together. The vision was both painful and strangely comforting. Near her 5th month of pregnancy, Ashley received an unexpected visit at her new, smaller apartment near the hospital. Catherine had returned home the week before, reluctantly, but needing to attend to her own life and responsibilities. The doorbell rang on a quiet Saturday morning. When she opened it, Ashley found Eleanor Williams, Mark's mother, standing there, elegantly dressed and clearly uncomfortable. "Eleanor," Ashley couldn't hide her surprise. "What are you doing here?" "May I come in?" the older woman asked, her usual confidence dimmed. "Please?" Ashley hesitated, then stepped aside to let her in. In the modest living room, Eleanor looked out of place, like an expensive painting hung in a cozy cottage. "Mark doesn't know I'm here," Eleanor began, politely declining tea. "In fact, he'd probably be furious if he found out." "Why?" Ashley asked, instinctively placing her hands protectively over her visible belly. Eleanor noticed the gesture, her expression softening. "Because I came to apologize, Ashley, and because there are things you need to know, things that might change how you see everything that happened." Ashley sat down slowly, a strange tension building inside her. "What kind of things?" Eleanor took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "First, I want you to know I never approved of Mark's behavior. The affair, the lies, that's not how I raised him." "You don't need to apologize for his actions," Ashley said automatically. "I'm not apologizing for him," Eleanor replied. "I'm apologizing for my part in all this, for never being truly fair to you." Ashley waited, confused, as Eleanor reached into her expensive handbag and pulled out a worn yellow envelope. "Do you know anything about our family history, Ashley? About William's first wife? Mark's father's first wife?" Ashley frowned. "Mark mentioned his father was a widower when he married you, that his first wife died young." "Yes," Eleanor nodded. "Sophia, her name was Sophia, died at 27. She had multiple sclerosis, diagnosed shortly after their wedding." A chill ran down Ashley's spine. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because William married her, knowing about the disease," Eleanor said, her voice dropping. "Out of pity. He admitted it to me years later. He was young, idealistic, thought he'd be a hero for saving a sick woman." The words hit Ashley like a punch. The similarity to what Mark had said was chilling. "After Sophia died, William married me. We were happy, had Mark, but that story haunted him. And when Mark brought you home for the first time," Eleanor paused, visibly uncomfortable. "I was terrified history was repeating itself." "So you really thought he was with me out of pity," Ashley said, the sting of that realization still sharp. "In the beginning, yes," Eleanor admitted. "And God forgive me. But I even suggested it to him once. I asked if he was trying to be like his father, saving someone he saw as fragile." Ashley closed her eyes, nausea rising from deep within. "But it had nothing to do with pregnancy." "And what did he say?" "He was furious," Eleanor replied, still surprised by the memory. "He told me you were the strongest woman he'd ever met, that your condition had nothing to do with how he felt about you." "I've never seen him so angry." A heavy silence settled between them as Ashley tried to process the revelation. Then why did he say it? Why use the same words his father did? Eleanor handed her the envelope she had been holding. "That's where it gets complicated. These are letters I found in Mark's office while helping him sort some things. They're from Veronica." With trembling hands, Ashley opened the envelope and began reading the first letter. The handwriting was elegant, feminine. The paper was fine and expensive. "My dear Mark," it began, dated almost a year ago. "I need to tell you something I've kept hidden. Before we met, I worked briefly at Dr. Simmons's clinic as an admin assistant. That's where I first saw Ashley's medical file." Ashley froze, the blood draining from her face. "What? How could she?" "Keep reading," Eleanor urged gently. The letter went on to describe how Veronica had discovered details about Ashley's medical condition, information that was not public knowledge, how she had researched prognoses, treatments, long-term limitations. "When I realized you didn't know everything, that she hadn't told you the full extent, I knew I had to save you from a marriage built on lies. You deserve someone healthy, someone who can give you children without risk, someone like me." Ashley dropped the letter, feeling sick. This is insane. She accessed my medical records, and she's completely wrong about my condition. She is, Eleanor agreed, but Mark didn't know that. Veronica spent months planting doubts, manipulating him with half-truths and outright lies about you, your health, your future. And he believed her instead of asking me? Ashley's disbelief was raw and bitter. Mark has always had this need to be the protector, the savior, Eleanor said. It's something he inherited from his father. Veronica exploited that perfectly, making him think he was protecting you by not confronting you. Ashley flipped through the other letters, each revealing more of Veronica's manipulation. How she had implied Ashley's condition would deteriorate drastically. How she suggested Ashley had intentionally hidden the truth. How she positioned herself as the solution to every imagined problem. Why didn't Mark ever show me this? Why didn't he just ask me? Pride, shame, and in the end, weakness, Eleanor said honestly. He chose to believe someone he barely knew over the woman he married. I'm not excusing it. It's inexcusable. When did he find out the truth? Ashley asked, gathering the letters again. About a month ago, he confronted Veronica about inconsistencies, and she finally confessed. Ashley shook her head, overwhelmed. Then why didn't he tell me? Why say he married me out of pity if it wasn't true? Because at the time, he believed it was, Eleanor said gently. Veronica twisted things so thoroughly that Mark began to question everything, even his own motives. And when you confronted him, he was so consumed by guilt and confusion, he said the most destructive thing possible. He repeated the one thing he always despised about his father. Ashley stood abruptly, needing to move, to breathe. Why are you telling me all this now? What do you expect me to do with this information? Eleanor rose too, her gaze surprisingly soft. I don't expect anything. You have every right to move forward with the divorce, to never forgive him. I just thought you deserved the full truth before making any final decisions. When Eleanor left, Ashley remained frozen. The letters spread out around her like the scattered pieces of a morbid puzzle that finally fit together. For hours, she sat that way, rereading fragments, connecting dots, re-examining memories in light of this unsettling new truth. That night, with the moon high in the sky, Ashley finally picked up the phone and made the call she'd been avoiding since Eleanor's visit. Ashley? Mark's voice came instantly alert, despite the late hour. Is everything okay? Is the baby? Your mother came to see me today. She cut him off, her voice calm, measured. She brought the letters, Mark. Veronica's letters. The silence on the other end was deafening. Why didn't you tell me? Ashley asked. Why did you let me believe the lie? That you married me out of pity? His voice faltered. How could I tell you? How could I admit I was so weak, so easily manipulated? That I betrayed you based on lies I could have uncovered if I'd just had the courage to ask? You should have trusted me, Ashley said, the tears she'd sworn not to cry spilling anyway. You should have talked to me. I know, he whispered, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. The baby moved just then, a small, insistent kick, reminding Ashley of the life growing inside her, of the weight of all she now carried, and of the impossible choices ahead. This doesn't change what happened, Mark, she said at last. You still betrayed our trust, our marriage. I know, he replied, his voice thick with emotion. I'm not asking you to forgive me, Ashley. I just needed you to know the full truth. I never married you out of pity. Marrying you was the best decision I ever made, and destroying it was the worst. Ashley closed her eyes, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. I need time, Mark. Time to process all of this, to figure out what it means for us and for our child's future. I'll wait, he promised, as long as it takes. After she ended the call, Ashley placed her hands on her belly, feeling the baby's gentle movements. The truth had finally come to light, not the one she expected, but something far more complicated and unsettling. A web of lies, manipulation, and weakness had shattered what they once had, but it had also revealed who they truly were. As she gazed out at the sea through the window, Ashley realized she stood at a crossroads. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was still unwritten, and for the first time in months, she wasn't sure which path she would choose. Days had turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Summer had given way to fall, bringing cooler winds and the promise of change. Now, 7 months pregnant, Ashley had transformed the small seaside apartment into a true home. Not just a temporary refuge, but a place where she could truly start over. Her routine at the regional hospital had become familiar and comforting. As a pediatric nurse, Ashley found deep satisfaction in caring for children, especially knowing she would soon have her own son in her arms. Her colleagues, once just friendly faces, had gradually become real friends, a support network she hadn't expected to find. "Have you made a decision about his invitation?" asked Jennifer, a colleague who had grown particularly close, as they ate lunch together in the hospital cafeteria. Ashley sighed, pushing her salad around her plate. Mark's request to be present at the birth had been hanging over her for weeks. "I still don't know, Jen. On one hand, he's the baby's father, and has a right to be there. On the other, he shattered your heart into pieces," Jennifer finished bluntly. "No one would blame you for saying no." Ashley gave a sad smile. She had shared a simplified version of the events with Jennifer, just enough for her friend to grasp the complexity of it all, without revealing every painful detail. "The thing is, it's not just about me anymore, or about what he did," Ashley said, her hand resting on her growing belly. "It's about what's best for Thomas in the long run." Thomas, the name she had chosen for her son after weeks of reflection. Thomas William Williams. She wanted to honor his paternal lineage. Despite everything, she wanted her son to know that, regardless of the mistakes the adults in his life had made, he was deeply wanted and loved by both his parents. In recent weeks, Mark had held true to his promise of giving Ashley space. He hadn't pressured her for answers or decisions, contenting himself with weekly pregnancy updates and the occasional video call she had started to allow. During those calls, Ashley could see the apartment they once shared in the background, now rearranged, simpler, missing many of the personal touches she had added over the years. In one call, she noticed something that stayed with her for days. A book on fatherhood sitting on the coffee table. She hadn't said anything, but the detail lingered in her mind. "I think I'm going to let him be there," Ashley decided at last, surprising not only Jennifer, but herself. Not for him, for Thomas, so that one day, when he asks, I can tell him that from the very beginning, we were both there for him. After her shift ended, Ashley found a message from Laura. "Interesting news about your ex-friend Veronica. Call me when you can." Intrigued, Ashley called as soon as she got home. "Laura, what's going on?" "You're not going to believe it," Laura replied, barely able to contain her excitement. "Veronica Patterson was fired from Mark's firm this morning. Apparently, they found out she had illegally accessed confidential client files. She's being sued." Ashley sat down slowly, absorbing the news. "How did you hear that?" "Thomas works with one of the firm's lawyers, remember? Everyone's talking about it. Apparently it's not the first time. There were complaints at previous jobs, too." Ashley immediately thought of the letters, how Veronica had invaded her medical privacy. "Honestly, I'm not surprised. There's more," Laura continued. "Mark was the one who started the internal investigation. After you two separated, he started looking deeper into her professional history. He's the one who found the evidence that got her fired." Something strange stirred inside Ashley then. A mixture of satisfaction at seeing Veronica finally face consequences, and an unexpected flicker of admiration for Mark. He could have let it go, especially after ending the relationship, but he chose to dig deeper, to uncover the truth. "Ashley, you still there?" "Yes, sorry," she replied, returning to the moment. "Just processing." After hanging up, Ashley stepped out onto the balcony and watched the sun dip below the horizon. The salty breeze carried with it a feeling she hadn't felt in a long time: clarity. For months, she'd been in survival mode, reacting to events rather than choosing her own path. But with Thomas's birth drawing near, it was time to change that. It was time to take control, to actively shape her future, rather than simply respond to it. The next morning, she made a decision she'd been putting off. She scheduled a meeting with the regional hospital's administrator. "I've been thinking about the community clinic again," she told Dr. Richards, a seasoned administrator with decades of experience. "There's a real need here, especially for low-income families." Dr. Richards looked at her over his glasses, intrigued. "Go on." Ashley laid out her vision: a clinic offering affordable basic health care, with a special focus on children with disabilities and their families. The kind of place she and her mother had desperately needed when she was growing up. "It's an ambitious project," the director noted, not unkindly, "especially for someone about to become a single mother." "That's exactly why I need to do it now," Ashley replied with conviction. "I want my son to grow up knowing that challenges aren't obstacles, they're chances to create solutions." When she left the meeting with a promise of institutional support from the hospital, Ashley felt a surge of purpose she hadn't felt in months. The life she once imagined with Mark was gone, but that didn't mean she couldn't build something new, something even more meaningful. That afternoon, she received an unexpected call. Eleanor Williams. "Ashley, I'm sorry to bother you." Eleanor's voice sounded uncharacteristically hesitant. "But I heard you're allowing Mark to be present for Thomas's birth." "Yes," Ashley confirmed. "He has that right." "Thank you," Eleanor replied sincerely. "And I was wondering, would you allow me to visit at the hospital afterward? Not during the birth, of course, but just to meet my grandson. I'll understand completely if you say no, but he'll be my first." And Ashley was touched by the vulnerability in Eleanor's normally composed voice. Something had shifted between them in recent months, a mutual understanding, maybe even a kind of respect that hadn't existed before. "Of course you can come, Eleanor. Thomas will need all the family he can get." The next day, Ashley was reviewing documents for the clinic when the doorbell rang. She opened it to find Mark, looking nervous and holding a folder. "Sorry for dropping by unannounced," he said quickly, "but I found something I thought you should see in person." Ashley hesitated, then stepped aside and let him in. It was the first time Mark had seen her new apartment. She watched him take it in. The photos on the walls, the bookshelves, the crib in the corner she had assembled just last week. "It's cozy," he said sincerely. "It suits you." "Thanks," Ashley replied, keeping a respectful distance. "What did you want to show me?" Mark placed the folder on the coffee table and opened it, revealing a series of documents. "I was organizing some old files and found these. They're the preliminary sketches for your community clinic, the ones we worked on together a few years ago." Ashley looked down at the papers, memories washing over her. They had spent countless nights dreaming about the project, Mark turning her ideas into real designs. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked, emotion catching her off guard. "I heard you're reviving the project," Mark said, a soft smile playing on his lips. "Laura mentioned it the last time we spoke." Ashley nodded, surprised that Laura and Mark were still in touch. "It's true. The regional hospital is backing it." "That's amazing, Ashley," he said, and the admiration in his voice felt genuine. "I always knew you'd make it happen." Then he pulled out a second set of plans. "I updated the designs, taking into account the coastal location, the community's needs. Just a suggestion, of course. I'm sure you already have your own plans." Ashley picked up the revised sketches, examining them with a professional eye. They were excellent, detailed, thoughtful, clearly informed by the same core vision they had shared years ago. "This is—" she paused, trying to find the words. "This is really good, Mark. Thank you." he said, visibly relieved. Consider it a contribution to your dream. No strings attached. No expectations. The baby moved then, a firm nudge that made Ashley instinctively place her hand on her belly. "He's kicking?" Mark asked, eyes lighting up. For a moment, Ashley considered holding the boundary she had so carefully built, but something inside her softened. "Yes," she said. And then, surprising them both, she took his hand and placed it on her belly. "Right here." "Wait a second." When Thomas kicked again, Mark's face lit up with wonder. "Wow," he whispered, like he didn't want to break the spell. "He's strong." "Like his father," Ashley replied without thinking, and immediately felt the weight of those words. Mark met her gaze, vulnerability shining in his eyes. "Ashley, No," she interrupted gently, pulling his hand away. "Let's not complicate this. We're finding a new rhythm, a different kind of relationship because of Thomas. Let's stick to that. For now." Mark nodded, respecting her boundary. "That actually reminds me. I have something else to tell you," he said, shifting the conversation. "I bought a house here in town." Ashley blinked. "You're moving here?" "I already have," he confirmed. "I couldn't keep living hours away from my son. I've opened a satellite office for the firm. Eleanor's considering relocating too, though she's still on the fence." "That's unexpected," Ashley admitted, feeling a bit unsteady from the news. "I know it might seem sudden," Mark said, "but I promise I'm not trying to pressure you or invade your space. I just want to be here, to be the father Thomas deserves." Ashley looked at him, still the man she once loved, but also someone new, someone quieter, more reflective, someone who had confronted his failures and was trying, genuinely, to be better. "There's a room for him in the house," Mark added, "for when he's old enough to visit, if you're comfortable with that." There was a time when Ashley would have seen that as manipulation. Now, she just saw a father trying to do right by his child. "Thanks for telling me," she said, "and thank you for the clinic sketches. They'll really help." As Mark turned to leave, he paused at the door. "Ashley, I know it might not mean much now, but I'm proud of you, of how you've handled all this, of how you've moved forward. You've always been the strongest person I've ever known." The words hit her like a distant echo, the same ones Eleanor had said he once used to defend her. After he left, Ashley sat looking at the clinic plans, a slow smile forming on her lips. It wasn't revenge she had been seeking, she realized. It was redemption. It was creating something meaningful from what had been broken. It was proving to herself, to Mark, and most of all, to baby Thomas, that endings don't define entire stories, that sometimes, from the hardest falls, the most extraordinary flights are born. That night, sitting on the balcony watching the ocean, Ashley felt a peace she hadn't known in months. The road ahead was still uncertain, still filled with challenges, but for the first time, she truly felt ready to face it. Not as a victim, not merely as a survivor, but as the architect of her own future. "We're almost there, little one," she whispered to her belly, feeling Thomas stir in response, "and whatever the future holds, we'll face it together, with strength, with purpose, with hope." Winter had settled over the small coastal town when the first signs of labor began. Ashley was at the community clinic, now nearly a reality, putting finishing touches on some administrative paperwork when the first contraction hit. It was 2 weeks ahead of schedule, but Dr. Peterson had warned her that first babies often arrived early. "I need to get to the hospital," she told Jennifer, who was helping organize the clinic's files. "I think Thomas is on his way." The calm with which she spoke those words surprised even herself. For 9 months, she had prepared for this moment, not just physically, but emotionally. She was ready. On the way to the hospital, Jennifer called Mark as they had agreed. By the time they arrived, he was already there, pale with anxiety, but determined to stay composed and support Ashley. "You came," Ashley said, trying to breathe through the contraction that tightened every inch of her body. "I promised," Mark replied simply, walking beside the wheelchair that carried her to the delivery room. The next several hours were a whirlwind of pain, exhaustion, and fierce determination unlike anything Ashley had ever experienced. At times, the discomfort was so overwhelming she thought she couldn't go on. But then she would look over at Mark, who, though clearly terrified, never left her side, offering gentle encouragement, holding her hand, honoring every boundary she set. "You're amazing," he whispered during a rare calm between contractions. "So strong." When the time finally came, Ashley drew on reserves of strength she didn't know she had. With one last powerful push, Thomas William Williams entered the world. Tiny, loud, and perfectly healthy. "He's a beautiful boy," the nurse said, placing the newborn on Ashley's chest. The world seemed to slow in that instant. Ashley looked down at the little life she had carried for 9 months. His swollen eyes still closed, his red face scrunched, his tiny fingers grasping at the air, and felt an overwhelming love, greater than anything she had ever known. "Hi, Thomas," she whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks. "We've been waiting for you." When she looked up, Mark was beside her, crying silently as he stared at their son. "He's perfect," Mark said, his voice thick with emotion, "just like his mom." In the days that followed, as Ashley recovered in the hospital, she was surrounded by a steady stream of visitors. Catherine arrived on the first available flight, overflowing with pride and joy at meeting her grandson. Eleanor came bearing carefully chosen gifts and an uncharacteristically soft expression as she cradled Thomas for the first time. Laura, Jennifer, and other friends filled the room with flowers, cards, and promises of support once she returned home. But it was the quiet moments, after the guests had left, that moved her the most. Watching Thomas sleep, marveling at every tiny expression, breathing in his newborn scent, it was like discovering the world all over again. A week later, when Ashley returned home with Thomas, she was surprised to find the apartment transformed. The fridge was stocked, baby supplies neatly arranged, and a new cozy rocker set up beside the crib. "Team effort," Laura explained when asked. "Everyone pitched in. Mark coordinated it all but respected your space. He never entered, just made sure it was done." The first months of motherhood were exhausting but deeply rewarding. Thomas was a relatively calm baby, temperamentally more like Ashley, with Mark's unmistakable eyes. Every milestone, his first smile, his first laugh, his first roll, was documented and celebrated. Mark remained present in a consistent, respectful way. At first, he visited only during agreed-upon times, always bringing something useful or offering practical help instead of flashy gifts. Over time, Ashley began to relax the boundaries, welcoming more spontaneous visits, appreciating the second pair of hands during sleepless nights, or when Thomas had a mild fever. The community clinic officially opened when Thomas turned 4 months old. It was a sunny spring day, marked by a small ceremony attended by local supporters, healthcare professionals, and community members. Ashley, holding Thomas in her arms, cut the red ribbon at the clinic's entrance to enthusiastic applause. "The Coastal Community Clinic is officially open," she announced, filled with a wave of accomplishment as she looked around at her dream made real. Mark stood among the crowd, discreet but unmistakably proud. The designs he had once sketched had become real walls, rooms, and hallways, all tailored for families facing challenges like those Ashley had known growing up. When Thomas turned 6 months, Ashley began allowing him to spend time at Mark's seaside house. At first, she accompanied him. The home was modest but warm, with a room specially decorated for Thomas, full of educational toys and children's books. "You're really making this work," Catherine said during a regular visit, "creating a healthy environment for Thomas, despite everything." "We're trying," Ashley replied, watching through the window as Mark pushed Thomas's stroller along the beach. "He's really trying to be a good father." "And the two of you?" Catherine asked gently. "Have you forgiven each other?" Ashley thought for a long moment. Forgiveness is a process, she said at last. Some days are easier than others. On Thomas's first birthday, they held a small celebration in Mark's backyard. It was a quiet afternoon with only close family and a few dear friends. Thomas, now taking wobbly first steps, was the center of attention, charming everyone with his four-tooth grin and infectious laugh, as she watched him try to blow out his candle, with considerable help from Mark. Ashley felt a strange fullness in her heart. It wasn't the life she had planned, certainly not the path she would have chosen, but there was undeniable beauty in what they had built from the wreckage. Later, with most of the guests gone and Thomas finally asleep, Ashley joined Mark on the porch, where he was quietly watching the waves. "It was a good day," she said, standing beside him. "Thomas looked really happy." "Because of you," Mark replied. "You created this ability to turn even the hardest things into something beautiful." They stood in silence, the sound of the ocean filling the space between them. "I have something for you," Mark said eventually, pulling an envelope from his pocket. "It's a birthday gift for Thomas, but in a way, it's also for you." Ashley opened it and found legal documents. As she read through them, her eyes widened. She hesitated, unsure she'd read it right. "You're transferring half of your firm into a trust in Thomas's name?" Mark nodded. "And not just that. 20% of the company's annual profits will permanently go toward supporting the community clinic, so it can stay open no matter what happens with funding." Ashley clutched the papers, understanding what they meant. "Why?" "Because I want our son to grow up knowing his father acknowledged his mistakes and tried to make them right," Mark said honestly. "And because your work with the clinic is too important to depend on unstable grants or donations." Overcome with emotion, Ashley didn't speak. Instead, she reached out and briefly touched Mark's hand, for the first time in over a year, without Thomas between them. "Thank you," she said finally. "There's one more thing," Mark added, suddenly nervous. "Something I need to tell you before you hear it from someone else." Ashley felt a flutter of unease, bracing herself. "I've met someone," Mark said softly. "Nothing serious. We're just talking. But I thought you should know." Ashley processed the news, surprised by the complexity of emotions it stirred. Some sadness, a flicker of jealousy, but mostly relief. Relief that Mark was moving forward honestly this time, with no secrets or deception. "I hope it works out," she said sincerely. "Thomas deserves to see his parents happy, even if they're apart." Mark studied her. "And you, Ashley? Have you found happiness?" The question caught her off guard, but the answer came easily. "Yes," she realized, smiling, "in ways I never imagined. I have Thomas, the clinic, my independence. I've discovered a strength in myself I didn't know existed." That night, carrying a sleeping Thomas in her arms as she returned home, Ashley reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 18 months. From the ashes of a marriage wrecked by betrayal had risen something unexpectedly precious. Not just a new life in her son, but a new version of herself. A woman who knew her worth, who was no longer defined by anyone else's gaze, who had learned that forgiveness didn't always mean reconciliation, but it did mean freedom. 6 months later, on a bright summer afternoon, Ashley sat on the beach watching Thomas, now nearly 2 years old, chase a seagull under Mark's watchful eye. The clinic was thriving, serving dozens of families weekly. Her work had even drawn attention from national health organizations interested in replicating the model elsewhere. "Mama, look!" Thomas shouted, pointing to something in the sand. His vocabulary was growing quickly, impressing everyone. Ashley knelt beside him. "What did you find, sweetheart?" Thomas proudly held up a small, perfect shell, his eyes sparkling with discovery. Mark joined them, kneeling to explain patiently to their son about the creatures that once lived in shells like that. Watching the two of them, Ashley felt a strange sense of closure. Not the kind that comes with clean endings, because real life rarely offers those, but the kind that comes from deeply accepting what is, instead of mourning what might have been. "Ashley," Mark called, pulling her from her thoughts. "Eleanor's watching Thomas Saturday. Thought you could finally make it to that medical conference you mentioned." "Thank you," she replied, truly appreciative. That would be perfect. This was their rhythm now. A delicate dance of co-parenting, shared responsibility, mutual respect. It wasn't the fairy tale she'd once envisioned when she said "I do" 5 years ago, but there was a quiet dignity to it, and even beauty. That night, after putting Thomas to bed, Ashley found a small box in her bag. The shell Thomas had found, cleaned and turned into a delicate pendant. A simple note accompanied it, in Mark's unmistakable handwriting, "To the strongest woman I've ever known. Thomas and I are lucky to have you. No matter what." Ashley held the pendant for a long moment, a soft smile forming on her lips. The cruel words that once broke her, "I married you out of pity," now felt like echoes from another life, spoken by people they no longer were. Real justice, she realized, hadn't come through revenge or punishment. It had come through growth, through healing, through the choice to build something beautiful out of something broken. Through the understanding that some wounds never fully close, but we can live fully anyway. And as she placed the shell pendant on her nightstand, Ashley felt a profound certainty that no matter what tomorrow held, she was ready. Not in spite of her journey, but because of it. Strong, resilient, finally, truly free. "Tomorrow is a new day," she whispered, looking out the window at the moonlit ocean. "And I'm ready for it." See, if you've made it this far, it means this story touched your heart in some way. Comment the word "rebirth" below, so I know you stayed with me through this emotional journey. And don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for more stories like this one. Thanks for the coffee, and see you next time.